breaking my wrist mid-season was probably not my finest strategy call.
See, I had a brake failure on my motorcycle whilst riding at over 200 kilometers an hour at Queensland Raceway. I remember as far as getting to the gravel trap at the end of the straight, but nothing else after that until I was already in the ambulance. I came away with a concussion, 2 minor fractures, and a small rupture in the left lung.
But I'll be damned if I'm going to miss the last 2 rounds of the Ozicar Tin Top Cup.
I turned down the force feedback and remapped some buttons on the steering wheel so that I could shift gears with one hand. We entered the race at Phillip Island fully expecting to come last, but surprise, surprise, we actually beat 5 drivers and scored a load of points.
Here we are 2 weeks later at the season finale in Bathurst.
The legendary mountain course known for punishing drivers and eating cars. I had a terrific 5-way battle in this one, which we'll have a look at shortly, but first, I'm slightly ashamed to say this, I've abandoned my trusty GR86 in favour of the Mazda MX-5 for its impressive straight line speed. Sorry, Toyota. Ever the consummate professional, I completely balked my quali out lap by sending it into the wall at Forest Elbow on cold tyres. I knew straight away that the steering was stuffed and I figured I'd very likely be starting at the back of the grid, but felt the need to make sure of that by bottling my flying lap on turn 1. Having dropped it twice in the space of half a lap, I sat in the car to have a little think about the quality of my decisions. Take a moment to note the angle of my front wheels. Alright, with qualifying over, we all line up on the grid, and I don't realise my wheels are still pointing in the direction that I left them. The steering wheel looks straight from where I'm sitting, but when the lights go out, the car lurches to the left and I nearly murder Warren Henry. In contrast, Trevor Hearn gets a cracking start to an otherwise ill-fated race, but he leads an armada of Mazdas, including myself, past the slower launching Toyota of Craig Tilson, who sadly loses 4 places before turn 2. Gavin Barber, another 86 driver, suffers a similar fate, and I'm one of 3 MX-5s to pass him by the end of Mountain Straight.
At this point, I'm feeling pretty good about the switch to Mazda.
We tuck in here behind Daniel Boswell and use the superior acceleration of the MX-5 to get alongside him. But he's got the inside line and holds me off all the way up to McPhillamy Park at the top of the hill. At the end of the first lap, he closes up on me into Murray's corner and gets a great exit, and that forces me to go defensive and compromise my exit out of turn 1. I barely managed to hold him off down that long first straight, but lucky for me, Boswell starts to come under pressure from John Snell, and in a mirror image of my earlier pass, the two go side by side all the way up the mountain. That gives me a bit of breathing space as they fight for position. Boswell thinks about coming back at Snell and has a big look down the inside at the chase, but doesn't commit to the move. Then on lap 3, things go from bad to worse for Boswell, as Warren Henry adds to the growing list of MX-5s passing him under acceleration. With Snell and Henry behind me, that gives me a nice 2-car buffer back to the Toyota driver. What's more worrying now are my Mazda brethren who are rapidly closing in on me. Snell gets a great exit out of the chase, and I end up putting myself in an awkward spot that kind of screws both of us. See, ideally, I would have been either a little closer to Snell or yielded and tucked in behind him. Instead, we all get bunched up here and end up going 3 wide into Hell Corner. I yield to Henry on the inside while Boswell slings it around the outside of both of us, but he catches a bit of the grass on the exit and that slows him down just enough that Henry can retake the position. I try to follow him through but lift off the throttle, erring on the side of caution. 2 corners later, Henry spins it at the cutting. We all manage to squeeze past unscathed, but that's the sort of crash that can easily end up in a multi-car pileup. Boswell and I quickly close the gap to Snell, who has a bad run through the dipper and Boswell slips through. I almost get alongside Snell here, but he manages to keep me at bay as we descend towards Forest Elbow. He takes a very tight line and gets a bad exit, so I'm all over him like cheap glue in a Cybertruck. But instead of going for an easy overtake, I opt for the bump draft to try and close the gap to Boswell, who's now leading the pack and at risk of getting away. Soon Snell is within slipstream range of Boswell and breezes past him on Mountain Straight. Once again, Boswell and I go side by side over the top of the mountain, and it's a game of chicken as we rapidly approach the cliff edge that is Skyline. In that moment, I choose to be pro-life and give way to Boswell, who gets a little out of shape over the crest but manages to gather it all up and keep it out of the wall. This time it's Boswell who gets the slipstream on Snell, getting the pass done on the way into the chase. Snell again takes an extremely defensive line that hurts his exit, and I make the pass. We get a great run on Boswell out of Quarry Bend, but perhaps foolishly, I move to his right-hand side and get squeezed up against the wall with no way through at the cutting. Then on the next lap, Snell comes back at me on Mountain Straight and I spot Jamie Stovald in my rearview mirror. He's just rejoined the race after his compulsory pit stop. Now our fight isn't with Stovald today, so we move aside to let him through. On lap 9, Snell actively lets me pass on Mountain Straight, braking well before the turn. To what ends I'm not quite sure, but by this point I've got less than 2 litres of fuel left, so I have to come in for my compulsory pit stop. But I failed to activate the pit lane speed limiter, so I cop a hefty 40-second stop and hold penalty for my ineptitude. I blame it on the deadly combination of 3 things. 1, I couldn't read the dash clearly in VR. 2, I wasn't as familiar with the car as I should have been. And 3, I forgot that I'd remapped some of the buttons to allow for that one-handed shifting.
It's a timely reminder for me that being good at racing isn't just about going fast. It's also about being really prepared and minimizing these variables that can catch you out.
That penalty put me out of the fight, and I spent the next 20 minutes going around in last place until Trevor Mortimer had this unusual crash that sent him flying into the barriers and destroyed the front left corner of his car. But what about everybody else? Well, I've got to hand it to John Merritt. The guy is an absolute monster.
A mistake early on in the race dropped him down to 17th place, but he managed to fight back all the way to 3rd. Let's see how he did it.
He started the race from pole position, but quickly lost the lead to Daniel Stevens and his turbocharged Renault Clio, which is a rocket ship off the line. Stevens seemed comfortable leading the race until he overcooked it at the chase, allowing Merritt and Stovald through. The 3 of them duke it out for a few laps, and then Merritt decides to pit early, just 4 laps into the race. Which I don't fully understand, but I'm also not in the business of questioning choices made by drivers who have double my I rating and possibly even double my IQ. When Stovald pits a lap later, Stevens inherits the lead, leaving him completely unobstructed, whilst Merritt and Stovald will have to carve their way through a bunch of slower drivers, potentially holding them up. I was fully expecting Stovald to rejoin the race either just in front or just behind Merritt, but Merritt is nowhere to be seen. Turns out, he too copped a pit lane penalty, and all I can say about that is,
don't worry about it, John. Happens to the best of us, even to me.
By his own account, Merritt is fuming at this stage and goes full beast mode. He sets a crushing pace, banging out lap after lap in the 2-minute 35s.
For comparison, my fastest race time was a 2-minute 38.
He quickly deposes Trevor Mortimer and Brodie Shepherd, then Timothy Harris just lets him through on lap 8. Perhaps a bit of conspiracy there between the Ozicar Toyota teammates. Then Merritt narrowly passes Gavin Barber as he exits pit lane, before Cameron Edwards then spins it on lap 10, gifting another place to Merritt. Then Boswell succumbs on lap 11, unable to hold off the Raging Bull down Mountain Straight, and Merritt receives another helping hand from Tony Baker, who's also an Ozicar Toyota teammate. Ira Felberg, one of just 2 Clio drivers, is having a strong race, but clips the wall coming out of the dipper, and that allows Merritt to easily squeeze by. Trevor Hearn has a monumental crunch on lap 13 at the dipper, and it only gets worse for him at Forrest's elbow. So Merritt picks up another place. Nathan Burney is the next victim, getting swallowed up down the Mountain Straight, and similarly, Merritt slingshots past Elliot D on lap 16 down the famous Conrod Straight. D manages to hang with Merritt for the first half of the next lap, and he gets a front row seat to the 2-wheeled spectacle of Merritt floating through the dipper. Poetry in motion.
So Merritt takes the final podium spot and finishes the race just 30 seconds behind the race winner, Jamie Stovald,
who himself only narrowly beat Dan Stevens in the Renault by less than half a second. So yes, massive congratulations to the top 3 guys, especially John Merritt for winning the overall Drivers' Championship, and a shout out to Ira Felberg and his team who do a great job of organising the Ozicar Tin Top Cup.
And last but not least, thanks for watching Pixel Racer Club. It's awesome that I get to share this hobby with you, and it just wouldn't be the same without you here.
In terms of what's next, we're going to be taking things up a notch next season with a switch to the GT4 class. I'm planning to race the McLaren 570S, which has roughly double the power of the Toyota GR86 that I've been racing for the past year, and almost twice the weight of the diminutive MX-5 that we just drove at Bathurst.
We're also making a geographic switch, moving away from the Australian and Japanese circuits to predominantly Spanish tracks, including 3 that I know very well as a MotoGP fan. So plenty to look forward to, and I've already gotten started on pre-season preparation, so keep an eye out for more videos soon. See ya!